Hi, I'm Rich Powers from the PC Help Desk. We're not your typical help desk. We don't help you with your computers, networks, and printers. We focus on you, the user, helping you to get your work done faster using your Microsoft products. This video is going to showcase some of the ways that we can help you by getting technology to do more of your work. In this demo, I'm going to show you a common approach to collecting raw data from CSV text files and adding it to Excel reports that'll be used in monthly reviews. It's time consuming, it's very prone to error, and the data are stored in separate files for each year, making it hard to compare data across years. Next, I'll demonstrate how we can leverage the power of Microsoft 365 to extract the data from a couple of those yearly Excel reports, load it all into a single database table, and then create a more powerful report based on that data. Finally, I'll show you how we can build reusable tools using Microsoft 365 that make working with those same text files as easy as clicking a button. Let's get started. In this example, imagine that we have a company with four regions: North, South, East, and West. And we have to produce a report that looks like this to be used in a review meeting at the end of every month. So we have a sheet tab for North, South, East, West, and of course we have a summary tab that rolls all that data up at the end. This is only 2023 data, but that kind of hints at the fact that we probably have one file for every year. Not a great solution. It's better than having it all in text files like this. And this is the raw data that would come to a person at headquarters, say, and that person would be responsible for transposing this data from a text file or a CSV file in this case into this report. This is a very, very common operation. You may get this information from SAP. You may get it from an old AS400 legacy system in your manufacturing arrangement somewhere. So the fact is, it doesn't matter where it comes from, it's data. And I can't copy and paste the data into this because they don't look the same. They're not laid out the same. And even within the CSV file, I have two groupings of data. I have information up here in the header, and then I also have the actual data. You can see that I get the data for a company, but I don't have any place to put it over here. So it's a missed opportunity. Also, what if we had data like this and it was hundreds and hundreds of rows, which would not be unusual in a case like this. Somebody has got to come in here. The person that receives this via email has to save this file, open it up, and then manually take the data from here and somehow fit it into the report. There's a lot that can go wrong here. They'd have to recognize and just be cognizant of the fact that this file in particular is for East. So they have to remember the data has to be entered on this sheet. And it's also for the month of April. So all the data that I'm going to put in from here has to go in this column. Then I've got to go down and I've got to say, okay, I have a part number PWD002. I've got to find that row, and then I've got to put the correct units in the correct column on the correct sheet. And then what would happen if later on, maybe 100 rows down, I find another instance of part number PWD002. Again, 60 units, but for a different company. Well, now I've got to come here and I've got to change that. It's a very, very tedious operation. And it's one that could easily get messed up, right? It could be typos. Somebody could maybe not follow the row across and put it on the wrong part number row. Or maybe they do this math in their head and they mess up and they don't put 120, they put 110. So there's all kinds of different ways that this could go wrong. The problem is that we're trying to fit data from here into this report manually. We're not actually taking this data and putting it in a database. So the fact that we have this data spread out across multiple sheets and actually across multiple files means it's less usable. The computer really can't do much with it when it's spread out across sheets and files like that. That's not to say it can't be used, it's just more difficult. So what we'd like to do is replace this very manual process with one that gets us a lot more benefits. And that would be to just take all of this data and stick it in a database table. That would be the ultimate solution. But in the meantime, what do we do with all the data that we've already got in our reports? So what I've done is I've built a 2023 file, which we're looking at here. I have a very similar file, same shape, same sheets, just different data for 2024. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and process that into a table and show you the benefits of doing that. So I'm going to close this, and I'm not going to save that. I don't really need to. And then what we're going to do is look at this file. So this file has all of that same data from both of the report files. I have some data here from 2023 and I have data from 2024. And we did that using Power Query, which is another feature that's built into Excel. And what it is it's a tool that allows us to perform ETL, which stands for extract, transform, and load. So what we did is I wrote some queries that go into those files individually, and it pulls the data, not from here. Let me pull up the right file. It says go to the old school reports folder, and it looks for any files in here whose name contains region RPTS and ends with .xlsx. Therefore, even though I have a CSV file in this, the Power Query script won't consider this file. It won't try to process that file. But once it does find files that match the criteria, it walks through and it processes all of the data that's on the sheets called North, South, East, and West, ignoring the summary. So I want to show you that this is actually a live query. It really does work. You can see I've got 386 records here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change the name of one of those files. All right, so I've now changed it so it doesn't match the criteria for the query, which means it's invisible. And if I come over here and I refresh this, what we'll see is it's going to run that same query against that folder and it'll process the files that match the criteria. And now you can see I have no 2024 data here because effectively it doesn't meet the criteria. If I come back and I undo that and then go and refresh the data once again, you'll see all the data comes back and I go from 306 up to 386 and I have 2024 data back. So what did that get us? Well, it gives us a database. It's not a great database. I wouldn't recommend storing all of your data in an Excel file. There are far better tools for doing that. And we're going to look at a couple of other tools in just a moment. But for now, it's a lot better than storing this across multiple files and multiple sheets. And here's the real payoff. I have a report that I built on one sheet that now contains the data for 2023 and 2024 all in one sheet. If I want to look at 2023 data, I simply click on this slicer and I filter the data by 2023. If I want to see just one sheet, I can choose just one sheet or one region in this case. And if I want to change it, I can easily change it to a different one. I could look at North and South. I could look at North and South for both years combined. So I can pretty much make any combination of these settings, even the summary tab. I could say, show me the summary tab, which means show me all the regions for 2023. And that's the same as looking at the summary tab in the 2023 file. And here's the same thing for 2024. I only have Q1 data in that file, so this actually makes sense. If I close this, get rid of that filter, I'm now looking at my essentially all-time figures for all regions. So think about what we've done. We have taken the data out of two separate files that comprise data for 2 years, combined it into a single table, and then built one-page report that gives us all the capabilities we had from within each of those individual files and more. I can easily combine the data and look at the aggregation of all that data. What's more is Power Query will read all of the files in this folder. So going forward, if I had a 2025 file and it's the same structure as 2023 and 2024, then it will all the data will appear here automatically. I don't need to take any other actions. So what a huge time savings. And frankly, it would be far easier to maintain data in a table like this because I don't have to worry about going to the right column, going to the right sheet in the right file. It's pretty easy to make sure that I put the data in the right column in a table. So while this isn't the best place for it, you can see the benefits of storing your data in a table over storing them in what we call the output or a report. Another takeaway here is we were able to capture that data from historical files. So let's say that I had 10 years worth of historical reports like this. I've been doing this same manual operation for 10 years. I don't have to forego that. I can get all of that data and pull it forward into a table and then forget about these. Just archive them. I don't need them anymore because I can use my single report here to report on all the data that's in this table. Again, not recommending we do that in Excel, but at least know that it's possible to go and retrieve the data, even though it doesn't look like a real database or a table from all of the prior reports. So now let's take a look at a different way to go about this, one that will deal directly with the CSV files. So I'm going to close this, don't need that file anymore, and I'm going to pull up a tool that I wrote in Excel. So Excel can be used for a lot of things, obviously, but in this case, it's a tool to be used to go and aggregate a bunch of data, and then we're going to push that data into a real database. So the file that I showed here, which was a text file for one region for 1 month, I've got 48 of those files representing all the regions, all the months for 2023. So imagine that instead of emailing each of those files from each of the regions to somebody one at a time each month for the whole year, I'm going to just kind of get right to the bottom of it, and we're going to process all 48 of these CSV files in one shot. And we're going to do it using the exact same tool we used in the last example, which is Power Query. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up another folder. This is a target folder, and I'm going to copy all 48 of these files into that folder. So essentially what we're doing is we're mimicking or taking a shortcut to mimic receiving 48 emails over the year and then saving the attachment files into a specific folder, as opposed to opening up each of those files and then having to manually deal with the data in each of them every month. So I've now got 48 files in this particular folder. And in this tool, what I've done is I've written some Visual Basic routines and I've attached them to some buttons here. And what's going to happen is when I go ahead and click this button, it's going to read all 48 of the files here. It's going to extract the data content from them. It's going to transform them so they no longer have the couple of data points up in the header and then some data down in a little table. And it's going to transform that data and it's going to aggregate it all into this table right here, just so we can see it. When it's done doing that, it's going to ask us if we'd like to see that data appear in an Access database. So I have an Access database here that I built that's actually linked to 3 different data sources. One of them is an Access database file that's on my local computer here. And you can see there are no records, there's no data here. I also built a SQL Server database and I hosted that out in the cloud at winhost.com. It's also empty right now. I have a third data source called Dataverse, which is part of the Microsoft Power Platform. That's empty as well. We're not going to deal with that one right now, but in a future example, we will deal with that and you'll see how that comes into play as well. So what's going to happen is we're going to process all of those files into this table. Then we're going to be prompted to see, do you want to load that into Access? And do you want to load it into SQL? And we're going to say yes to both. So we populate both databases. And then when all of that's done, the VBA script, the Visual Basic for Application script, is going to come into this folder. And after it's processed all of the files, it will change the extension from .csv to .done to indicate that they're done. They've already been processed. That way, if somebody, for whatever reason, push this button again, the same data won't be processed and added to these data tables a second time, giving us duplication. So let's go ahead and process this. I'm going to go ahead and click that button. It starts to run a script. And in just a few seconds here, we should see all 48 of files compiled and then displayed in this local table. We're not going to store the data here. We're just going to view it. And when it's done, we'll get a prompt to move it up into Access and into SQL. So I now have a whole bunch of data here, and it's asking, do you want to append this data to your Access table? I'll say yes. That's done. Now, do you want to append this data to SQL, which is up in the cloud? I'll say yeah. Now again, you wouldn't necessarily do this, right? You wouldn't put your data in 2 places. I'm doing this just as an example to show you what can be done with Visual Basic. We can do an awful lot using the VBA language to process information. And then while that's going, we'll take a look over here and we're going to very shortly see, after everything's been processed, we're going to see that the CSV extensions are all going to be changed to .done. And there we go. And then if I come back here, did everything go as planned? Yes, it did. So I'm done. And if I go to my Access database, I now have 306 records in my Access database table. And if I go to my SQL table, which is out in the cloud, and I go to the end of the record set, I have 306 records here. It's the same data. I just put it in 2 places just to show you that it's possible. So we did that from within Excel. It could have been done right from within Access, right? We could have used Access as a front end and done all of this as well. But I wanted to show the capabilities that you have with your Microsoft 365 products. And at this point, you've got a real database. I don't need to store the data here. This was just to show us that it's there. I can display the data here, and I don't need to keep it because I've got it in real databases. So I can simply close this file. I don't need to save it because next time I use it, it's going to regenerate the data from whatever files are there. And now that I have the data in a couple of different places, what does that get me? Well, it gets me the ability to build reports that look like this. So here's an example of a template that might be built as a reporting tool. Again, I'm using Excel. And you can see I've got 4 red sheets, I've got 4 blue sheets, and I've got 1 green sheet. The red sheets are all tied to data that's in that Access database table. The blue sheets are all tied to SQL Server data. It's the same data and just some slightly different visualizations. I didn't go crazy here, just for this example. But the last one here, Dataverse, there's no data there, so I have nothing to show. There's really nothing going on here. That would be used in a different example. We'll do it another time. So the fact is, this report can now be distributed to just about anybody. I can pre-build visualizations. In this case, I've got slicers, I've got a timeline, I've got a pie chart here, and it's all interactive. I could say, show me all of the customers whose last name begins with T. Or maybe I only want to look at these two. And I can just come in and help myself to this data, and it just works. I don't have to wonder, am I connected to the right data? Do I have the latest version of the file? It won't matter, almost won't matter, right? If I open this file up, it's connected to the only data there is, and that is our central repository for our information, wherever that happens to be, whether it's in Access, whether it's in SQL, whether it's in Dataverse, or some other data system. So by doing this, you're giving your users the ability to consume the data, to interrogate the data, to analyze the data, to ask their own questions by pre-building any kind of visualizations that you think that they would need. And then they can help themselves to it. And your data is protected because your data does not live anywhere in this file. So they can't edit it, they can't delete it, they can't add to it. All they can do is consume it. So by building some templates that are linked to whatever your single source of truth is for your data, you enable people, or you're empowering your users to always have access to the latest and greatest data. They don't need to know how to build these things. They just need to know what they want to ask. So this is a really good example of how the Microsoft 365 product line can help you deal with your data in a much more efficient fashion. Think of the time savings, right? Think of how easy it would be to simply distribute a file like this to all the users, or to even build multiple versions of this. Maybe I've got one version of this for salespeople and another version of this for management, and a different version of this for manufacturing people, or whatever. You can just use your imagination. You can build as many versions of this as you want. You can add as many different sheets as you want within the limits of what Excel can do. And nobody has to really know how to do this. All they need to know is I have the latest and greatest at any given time. So huge time savings over the original manual exercise that somebody would go through. And the added benefit is by putting your data in a real true database, you have access to it through reporting tools that you can also build using Microsoft 365. I hope this has been informative, and look forward to another database or another data exercise where we can actually fully automate this using parts of the Microsoft Power Platform. Hope to see you in the next video.